Welcome to Creature Guy Live Daily News. My name is Ethan. We have 5 articles to get through today. I want to hear your thoughts on these animals, and let's dive into the first article. So, from Sci News, new species of plant eating dinosaur discovered in Australia. Paleontologists in Australia have found fossil fragments from a new genus and species of ornithopod dinosaur that walked the Earth during the early Cretaceous epoch. So, we do have it where from the early Cretaceous is really the heyday for different species of herbivorous ornithopod dinosaurs occurring in the country, especially in different parts of Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, even into different parts of West Australia. We even have different species of larger sauropods roaming the region. So this seems to be a closer relative of possibly the Leonosaura in the region. But the question is, does this occur much earlier beforehand? If it occurred after Leonosaura, it would be towards the very beginning of the late Cretaceous, which is around 100 million years ago. So the new dinosaur belongs to ornithopods, a major group of herbivorous bird hip dinosaurs. Dubbed Galeonosaurus dorasi,
Hippie
it
dinosaurs?
um yeah, especially the ornithopods. It inhabited the rift between Australia and Antarctica approximately 125 million years ago. Okay, this is much earlier than Leonosaura, which is somewhere around 110 million years ago over in Queensland. And this is also before other larger species of ornithopods or elasmarians, more specifically, such as Mutabarosaurus. Now, when it came to the hadrosauromorphs or hadrosaurs, they don't seem to have really ever occurred over in Australia, or at least they're quite rare. But these animals are quite common within the country. 5 fossilized upper jaws of the ancient beast were found at the Flat Rocks locality of the Wonthaggi Formation in a region of Gippsland, Victoria, Australia. Okay, so this is also coming from the Wonthaggi Formation. We have found other species of ornithopods, I believe even certain types of sauropods and theropods from this region, especially also coming from southeastern Australia. The Galeonosaurus is the fifth small ornithopod genus named from Victoria, said Dr. Matthew Hernay, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of New England. Okay, so I guess let's bring up another species of dinosaur that possibly roamed the area. Iguana colossus. So Iguana Colo.
This can't be right.
Oh yeah, this is him. So this is a species of iguanodontid that belongs to a very odd lineage of ornithopod dinosaurs. So it's not exactly like the different elasmarians that you would find over in different parts of Australia. Also, this creature is not from Australia; it's from North America. So, different parts of the United States. This animal existed during the early Cretaceous period, so over 120 million years ago, and was close to the size of Iguanodon. In fact, it was one of the largest species of early Cretaceous iguanodontids to have inhabited North America at that point. So this creature is pushing somewhere around 30 feet or 9 meters, and also probably weighed somewhere around 2.5 to 3 tons, possibly larger in some instances. So it was likely just feeding on different species of some of the earliest flowering plants, going after different species of ferns. Yeah, it is very different from Iguanodon over in England, which occurred a bit earlier in time, around 135 million years ago, and was possibly a bit more, much more heavily built. I think when it comes to Iguana colossus, it has a more like a bit of a stocky sort of a frame to it, but more in just overall height. It doesn't seem to be as heavily built as Iguanodon itself. Iguanodon seems to be one of the, or probably the most heavily built iguanodontid from the early Cretaceous period. And even relative to its body size, it might be the most heavily built species of iguanodontid, and as well as its later descendants, the hadrosauromorphs and hadrosaurs, to exist, despite being not the largest ornithopod. But hadrosaurs in general had very, in some cases, you could say, brittle forelimbs. So, not designed to maintain a lot of trauma. But this animal, all these also seem to be coming from probably the same illustrator. I mean, it is a good
I just
representation.
liked it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a good representation of Iguana colossus. I guess you could say, it has a bit of a shorter beak compared to Iguanodon. I'm just using Iguanodon for reference because um,
Okay, was this a movie?
he's just a good Iguanodon to base off of. I'm wondering if it was just some shorter film this came off of. I don't recall any specific documentary. Very odd forelimbs, however, even for like a hadrosauromorph or a hadrosaur, because it has a more similar type of a forelimb structure, like more like its later predecessors or younger cousins, than compared to other iguanodontids at the time. Even animals like Decododon, which existed over in Utah around 130 million years ago. So this is quite strange, but he's also much larger than Decododon. Decododon is maybe reaching somewhere around 23 feet in length, or pushing 7 meters, and weighing just around a ton, or a little over 1,000 kilograms. Um, yeah, I guess also them like passing a flash flood or even a river would probably be a common sight to different migrations of these animals, especially if they're moving through different parts of Utah. This would also be the same for different lineages of later hadrosaurs and hadrosauromorphs in different parts of Montana, New Mexico, Alberta, where we have discovered them, even into different areas of adjacent Mexico. And as well, even if you traveled over into Asia and different parts of China, Mongolia, where there were many more lush ecosystems. I guess also referring to that time, iguanodontic migrations in Europe would have been quite common. So the discovery confirms, back to the article, that on a global scale, the diversity of these small body dinosaurs had been unusually high in the ancient Rift Valley that once extended between the spreading continents of Australia and Antarctica. Small ornithopods appear to have thrived on the vast forested floodplain within the ancient Rift Valley. I mean, this seems to be the case with a wide variety of different dinosaur ecosystems during the Mesozoic, especially during the Cretaceous, but you could even say the Jurassic and Triassic. Um, I guess you could say it is a bit odd that they're not mentioning different sauropods in this instance, which likely would have occurred in the region at the time. It might be a little early for certain species of sauropods, but 120, 125 million years ago, you have a wide variety of Aptian Cretaceous species of sauropods existing over in Australia. So this is, if it's what I think it is, like the upper jaw of this species of Elasmerian, possibly, because it's just saying Ornithopoda. That's a very basic classification for a large group of herbivorous dinosaurs, even of the Ornithischian lineage, which is what the ornithopods belong to. So the Ornithischians would also include the horned dinosaurs, such as ceratopsians like Triceratops and Styracosaurus, stegosaurs like Stegosaurus and Miragaia, and not including the ornithopods. The ankylosauromorphs like Ankylosaurus and Nodosaurus, or even well, Sclerosaurus is an ornithischian, but it belongs to the stegosaur clade, the Eutherian. Oh yeah, I guess a little bit more. Yeah, these are exquisitely well preserved teeth. Wow, yeah, look at that tooth. That's very serrated for an herbivorous species of dinosaur. It needed to be, considering plant material is much more tough or much harder to slice through than meat. So Gallionis dorsi is a close relative of Diluvicursor pickeringi, another small ornithopod named by Dr. Herne and co-authors in 2018 from excavations along the Otway coast to the west of the Gippsland region. Interestingly, the jaws of the new species and the partial skeleton of Diluvicursor pickeringi were similarly buried in volcanic sediments on the floor of deep, powerful rivers. So, possibly, what occurred here is that there might have been a flash flood, but it is mentioning volcanic sediments. So, maybe there was some volcanic eruption that occurred at the same time. So, that's a bit of a question, at least to what caused these dinosaurs' deaths. I guess there is another even larger species of dinosaur that we could bring up a bit later in time, however. By the way, somebody did ask yesterday um, about dinosaurs being over in the state of Georgia. We did have a handful, such as creatures like Ornithomimosaurus, Appalachiosaurus. Actually, in fact, before we head on to like another dinosaur that would relate to this article, um, let's actually bring up Appalachiosaurus itself. So Appalachisaurus. There was even a species of tyrannosaur that existed in the region. It wasn't the largest creature, however, but you could say it was one of the larger species of dinosaurs, at least that we have found in the state. Probably the largest predator we have found in the state of Georgia is the large crocodilomorph, probably the largest crocodilomorph we have discovered so far, called or named Deinosuchus. Its own more southern species of Deinosuchus within the United States. I think there might be certain issues here. Yeah, that's a very tyrannosaurid sort of a look. This guy is more along the lines of some type of a megalosaur, maybe even mixed with a megaraptorid to an extent. But it definitely has an early or mid Jurassic megalosaur theropod sort of a look. Gosh, I mean, somebody could possibly mistake this for like Dubrellosaurus. Probably not Megalosaurus, maybe a young one, but I highly doubt it. No. Oh, yeah, that's another a very elongated sort of a Megalosaurus look, at least for the skull, and I'd say an odd build for the
It's
rest
doing
of the
that with
body.
all of them.
Yeah, and then it's bringing up in a little iguanodontid, which looks too early Cretaceous for a wide variety of megalosaurs during the mid Jurassic, which had a
Look,
well, we're getting somewhere. Basically, it was a small late Cretaceous species of tyrannosaur that existed over in the southeastern United States. And it was pushing somewhere around 23 feet in length, or about 7 meters, and probably weighed somewhere between 1,800 to maybe 2,200 pounds, or right around a ton, or a little over 1,000 kilograms. Yeah, that's a good reconstruction of the skull. It is interesting. It does carry certain characteristics that are a bit along the lines of the later Nanotyrannus of the late Cretaceous of Montana around 68 million years ago. And then you can even see different Daspletosaurus resemblances. But then there are other things that make it its own thing, like looking at the end of the nostril and the way, like a very roundish sort of a look. Even when you look at T Rex has a very sort of, first of all, thin sort of nostril region, at least the center, um, like the bone center, like towards the top of the snout, and it's also curved downwards. This seems to be much straighter for this species of Tyrannosaur. What's closer to Daspletosaurus, but still different, is when you look. Ooh, there we go. At that horn structure just in front of the eye socket, it's a bit more similar. It is interesting because the animal itself does have something between like a megalosaurid and even a carcharodontosaurus, sort of a mixed type of look. I mean, along with the Tyrannosaur itself, looking at the teeth, those are very Tyrannosaur like, especially for larger species, and also the late Cretaceous. Even of certain larger theropods back in the early Cretaceous period, if you're referring to the Coelurosaur lineage or the lineage of theropods that the Tyrannosaurs belong to, even at that point to the larger species, the teeth really didn't even, they had a more steak knife type of a shape. So much more blade-like and not necessarily as wide. But definitely a very robust sort of a theropod. Trying to find his arms, however. Does he have any? I mean, he would naturally.
Wait, this is funny. He's
I-
listed under the same thing.
No, that's not him. I think that was somebody else. That was another species of tyrannosaur discovered more recently. Also having decently long arms compared to its body size. Probably this is probably one of the tyrannosaurs, and it's likely full grown too. This isn't some juvenile. It used its arms to help kill its prey. There is another species of tyrannosaur that has very long arms compared to its body size and existed towards the end of the Cretaceous. But yeah, that was odd that it brought up the megalosaurid looking animals, but when looking at the skull, I guess you could see how the mistake occurred. Oh, yeah, there is somebody else. The sauropod, the Futalungasaurus.
The what?
Futalungasaurus. Futalongasaurus. Well, this is a very odd depiction of the animal. I mean, you could have it with many species of sauropods where they might have had an enlarged throat sac, like many species of birds today. But I'd say that this seems to be a bit over exaggerated. And the animal resembles a bit more of something like a chimaerosaur and like some member of the Lithoastrodian lineage, which chimaerosaurs were not a member of. They were their own chimaerosauromorph lineage.
Is that it?
Could be. It definitely looks a lot closer. But the skull of this animal, maybe we have found certain fragments of it,
That's it.
is very very narrow compared to like even different members of the diplodocid lineage. It's almost like looking at a sauropod with a very, I'd say, spinosaur type of a skull structure. So it's almost like maybe he was feeding on fish now and then, but likely, I mean, he might have been feeding on different species of aquatic plants. Um, but he's probably just focusing on different species of specific conifers that his teeth were designed to um, chow through, or at least slice off easier compared to other species. But focusing on the rest of this animal, it's just a very odd look. Also, I think the nostrils are placed towards the top of the skull. That is a very old, at least I think it's an old depiction of the animals, considering well, what I mean by that is you have certain instances with different reconstructions with dinosaurs that were actually correct, like back in the late 1800s or the early 1900s to an extent, or at least on certain parts of their body. And then all of a sudden, somewhere in the mid and late 1900s, it was completely changed. And then in the past couple of decades, it was finally revered or
Reverted.
yeah, reverted back to its original look, which was already scientifically correct. Um, huh. Well, if this is an actual model, yeah, it's not bad. I'd say in this instance, at least with the skull, that looks definitely much more like possibly maybe a member like the Somphosphondylid lineage of sauropods, and it doesn't have that distinct, like very thin sort of a look when it came to just the skull structure in the picture. I mean, it was still a great drawing. But, I'd say the skull's a bit more heavily built, at least in this case. You know what this reminds me of? Despite its being likely not a member of the diplodocid lineage, its vertebrae kind of resemble a patasaurus to an extent. They're very large compared to the animal's neck. And it is interesting. Now, I mean, granted, it's its own type of um, skeletal reconstruction, but looking at many interpretations of Futalokangasaurus is that this animal really doesn't seem to have a very long neck compared to its body size, like many other species of larger sauropods.
Wait, I
Than
found a
what,
funny drawing.
yeah, than with what you see in the different drawings. Whoa! Oh gosh! Oh, that's gotta hurt. Yeah. Don't mess with dinosaurs.com.
Oh, I didn't even realize it was smushing the guts out of him.
Well, he has if those I don't
I was just
are those
looking at
supposed to
his
be ears
that's what I was looking at.
or like an elongated part of the skull? Some type of horns? Well, whatever carnivore he's smushing, which is possibly some species of Allosauridae, he's definitely finished. And then the other just ran away in cowardness.
I think you'd be running away if something just did that.
Um, huh, yeah,
Maybe the
interesting.
thing just has worms.
I mean, yeah,
It's a
but well,
medical procedure.
yeah, those are pretty large worms. Um, I mean, I don't know what to make of that picture. That was harsh. That was a good picture. Yeah, this is completely off on its own. Okay, well, back to this little mysterious, technically ornithopod. I mean, they did show us part of the upper jaw. However, Galeonosaurus dorsi is about 12 million years older than Diluvicursor picarengi, showing that the evolutionary history of dinosaurs in the Australian Antarctic rift had been lengthy. That's a huge step in time. So there were probably other animals in between that progressed to Diluvicursor. Prior to the discovery of Galeonosaurus dorsi, the only other ornithopod known from the Gippsland region was Contosaurus enterpidus, named in 1999. However, Contosaurus enterpidus had a shorter, more robust snout than that of Galeonosaurus dorsi. I think it is interesting with these different species of smaller, and I'm going to guess they're elasmerians, um dinosaurs that they would have had different types of skull builds despite occupying the same type of really niche in the environment, yet for some reason the in their evolution they decided to just build either more gracile type of looks or more heavily built type of skeletal structures. So that is odd with the Contosaurus compared to the new species, the Galeonosaurus, with these different mutations. And you could say this has occurred with a wide variety of different types of dinosaurs, but it seems to be more so in at least certain types of ornithischians, but it's really certain species or certain groups like the ankylosauromorphs. Actually, let's see if maybe he'll pop up. The Nodosaur Mimi. Just Mimi. You might need to put Nodosaur with it. So Nodosaur. He's a bit of a slightly more well-known dinosaur from Australia. He's a very odd creature, however. Or it's Minmi.
This one's a little blurry, but
It's not Minmi. This is possibly another species of Nodosaur from Australia. However, it does also resemble certain Canadian species of Cretaceous Nodosaurs. That's possibly Mimi. It's one of the smaller species of Nodosaurs, but I wouldn't necessarily call it tiny.
oh, Menme.
Yeah, okay, there was an N in its name. One of those creatures we're
Got
not
it.
sure if there's an extra letter or not.
This is funny.
Uh, um, is this are people in like a costume? And I mean, that's pretty impressive.
No, it's being held up right there.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, so this is one of the species of nodosaurs that was more along the lines of a member of Ankylosauridae, but it wasn't. Yet it doesn't seem to have contained a club tail like pretty much all members of Ankylosauridae. It, however, also didn't really consist of any elongated spikes, or you could say like shoulder blade or even rib cage thagamizers. They weren't exactly placed like on the rib cage, but they would be placed along the armor side of the body. This could be another depiction of it, but it's showing a more serrated type of a look for the tail, which might not really be necessarily a min-me trait. This is a bit closer. Yeah, maybe it's a bit dull when it comes to the armor. I'd say it's almost like a Saltosaur sauropod that decided to be an ankylosaur. Now, this animal didn't evolve from sauropods; it evolved from other eutherians during the early Jurassic. Basically, the Eurytherians, like Scelidosaurus, would branch off into different lineages of stegosaurs and ankylosauromorphs, so including both the ankylosaurs and the nodosaurs. And the nodosaurs and ankylosaurs would continue until the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago, unlike the stegosaurs, which seem to have disappeared from the fossil record around 100 million years ago. But Mimi is like pushing somewhere around 12 to maybe 14 feet in length, or pushing somewhere around 3.8 to maybe 4.2 meters. Well, he doesn't look like he's shaking his body yet. There seems to be.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
I'm not sure if it's pixie dust or it's just maybe there's like a light rain. Besides that, I think this specific specimen, um, I don't know. It's hard to say because Mimi has a very like, especially when looking at the skull. Um, no, I have to say it's a little too ankylosaur like, at least when looking at the skull itself. Because even when looking at the part of Mimi, which we do have portions of Mimi also, number of, or at least quite a bit of armor from the animal. But it's just that Nodosaur skulls in general are quite different from different species of Ankylosauridae. At least Nodosauridae, the skulls tend to be a bit more narrow. The beaks are not as large. Ankylosaurs have very wide beaks compared to most other lineages of dinosaurs. Even looking at different species of iguanodontids, it's just that I think part of it is they tend to have a bit of a longer, sort of a downward pointing beak or even bill, you could slightly say, but it would be more pronounced in the hadrosaurs like later on. Um, yeah, that one's a bit better. This is a close relative of Mimi, possibly lived over in Australia. I think that's an interesting reconstruction. I think something else with Mimi is that it tends to have slightly more heightened or tall leg limb or just limbs compared to its body size and other species of nodosaurs. And they might be a little more matching, at least when it comes to the length, but most nodosaurs in general had much shorter forelimbs compared to their hind limbs, which is odd. At least when you look at different members of the Ankylosauridae lineage of Ankylosauromorphs, they tend to match a bit better, or at least the limbs are close into proximity of the length of each other. So nodosaurs, at least maybe it's a bit different with Mimi, but there's massive dimorphism between the two sets. Not sure what museum that is, but there's a Chasmosaur. Hmm. Yeah, I think that might have been the same guy from before. I wonder if that was like Boreacapelta, but Boreacapelta has a more defined and a square sort of a skull structure. It was too narrow for him. He's also from Canada. So back to the article, we consider that these two similar sized dinosaurs fed on different plant types, which would have allowed them to coexist. Researchers also found that the ornithopods from Victoria are closely related to those from Patagonia and Argentina. Whoa! Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, you have it where it's an entirely different part of the world, completely branched off, even though you had different similar species and also somewhat closely related dinosaurs existing in Australia and South America, specifically Chile and Argentina region. So I guess you could say to an extent, it's not too surprising if you're looking at especially different members of the Titanosaur lineage of sauropods. But I guess ornithopods, since they're also a bit less talked about from Argentina, I think that's because the larger species of titanosaurs in the region tend to push these little guys away. We are steadily building a picture of terrestrial dinosaur interchange between the shifting Gondwanan continents of Australia, South America, and Antarctica during the Cretaceous period. Um, okay, I guess there is another species of sauropod I'd like to bring up, like specifically the Tustavisaurus. So, Tustavinos. Yeah, it's not him. There were certain
Wait,
guanton.
is it Tastavin?
Yeah, yeah, that's what it says here.
Yeah, but you spelled it TUS. Unless I misheard that.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's TAST.
Okay.
There we go. That's him. Now, what is interesting about this creature is that it's actually a much closer relative of the Camarasaurus from late Jurassic Utah. So, this animal, however, was inhabiting the country of Spain. It was actually discovered in the country in 2007 and is a medium sized species of sauropod. It's probably reaching somewhere between 50 to 55 feet in length or somewhere between 15 to 17 meters and probably maybe weighed in at 12 to 15 tons. The Camarasaurs, I think any that are somewhat familiar with, no, no. This is very large, even for their Xenosaurus or a ground sloth. Like, wow. Um, we need him on a weight watch. Yeah, that's a bit concerning. And he keeps going after the bark.
It
Actually,
cracked me up. I just had to put it up.
yeah, I think there is something else going on here. I don't think it's just a weight issue. Well, I mean, there is a weight issue, but like, I don't think it's too much food because that would be really challenging to put on weight just on those types of plants. I mean, sure, if he's not moving, it could occur. Kind of sad too. Okay, so, yeah, for this animal, I mean, this is an okay reconstruction. I mean, I guess you could say it is a very different look from the different species of Camarasaurs, especially from the Jurassic, but also certain other parts of the early Cretaceous. You also have it where different species of brachiosaurs, diplodocids also lived over in Spain. Really, a larger proportion known from the late Jurassic, but they do occur into the early Cretaceous as well. And certain cases, different members of Spondyli or even the Titanosaur lineage. But, this creature, I believe was wait a second. Trying to figure out who's right next to him. Is that a Baryonyx? It could be. You might have had it where different, Baryonychid species, like specifically Baryonyx, would have hunted the different species of medium to smaller species of sauropods over in early Cretaceous Southern Europe, since we have found Baryonyx over in the mainland of continental Western Europe and not just over in England. So, yeah, this is certainly possible. It is definitely I we do have evidence from different species of Spinosaurs, which is the group of theropod dinosaurs that Baryonyx belongs to, of these animals going after different species of iguanodontids, pterosaurs, but I wouldn't call the pterosaurs really an accomplishment unless it's a hatchling but or a smaller juvenile. It's very likely, I mean, considering they had very robust arms for their body size and even their skulls, despite them not really being powerful in the sense of certain members of Allosauridae or the tyrannosaurs or even different species of abelisaurs. Considering sauropods in general had very soft skin most of the time. They you wouldn't need a very robust skull to
What?
You would need a very robust skull to sustain a lot of damage to the different species of at least sauropods in southern Europe at that time, but many parts of the Mesozoic and especially into the Cretaceous. Okay, so well, it's good to see we have a little ornithopod here in Australia, or one more added to the Wonfagi formation. Let's head to another part of the world. From Sci News, carnivorous mammal larger than polar bear once roamed Kenya. Well, let's see who we have here. A gigantic meat eating mammal has been discovered after its jaw, portions of its skull, and parts of its skeleton spent several decades in sitting in a museum. Of course, it's one of these. Well, this looks somewhat familiar. I don't believe it is the Mastitotherium,
That
but
means it'd be bigger than a liger, right?
Liger has only reached somewhere around 1,000 pounds, or that. Well, okay, that would be larger than a female polar bear. So yeah, well, the fattest female polar bear we have on record was around 1,000 pounds. They usually don't reach much more than maybe 700 to 850 pounds, or a little over 400 kilograms. And fattest is like pushing 480 kilograms.
So it would be bigger than a liger.
Or an American lion, Panthera atrox fossilis. So, which was also about the size of a liger, pushing around 1,000 to 1,100 pounds, or a little over 500 kilograms. But this thing would tear apart a liger because ligers have a lot of issues when it comes to just athleticism. Despite its probably not being able to grapple for the most part, but we wouldn't really need to be concerned about that when it came to the different species of animals that it hunted. And considering at this time you had some earlier, well, let's see how old it is first. Dubbed Saimbakubwa Kuto Kafrika, and it means big lion from Africa in Swahili. The gigantic carnivore lived about 22 million years ago, or the early Miocene epoch, in what is now Kenya. The ancient creature was the size of a small rhinoceros and had a body mass of up to 1,500 kilograms. Whoa. So this is pushing like somewhere between 3,100 to 3,200 pounds. This would be like the largest species of carnivore to exist. And of course, this okay, so Simbakubwa Kuto Kutahafrika, a hyenodont. Yep, that seems to make up for especially this skull structure, but even the overall build is very hyenodonted like. And no, these are not members of the, well, closely related to today's hyenas. Hyenas evolved from a completely different evolutionary lineage of mustelids, which also include different species of weasels. So you could say that hyenas are more closely related to wolverines, different species of, or like the stoat, the pine marten, compared to these extinct hyenodonts. Hyenodonts also first evolved during the not Eocene, the Paleocene epoch around 61 million years ago. And possibly their earliest ancestors were arboreal. I mean, obviously, if you go further into the Cretaceous period, they're part of Carnivora. So this is a lineage of placental mammals that first evolved around 79 million years ago during the mid-Campanian stage of the Cretaceous. So they were actually coexisting with possibly certain species of smaller tyrannosaurs and hadrosaurs at the time, possibly even certain earlier ceratopsid dinosaurs or horned dinosaurs relative to Styracosaurus and Triceratops. But this is far after the dinosaurs went extinct. I mean, we're over in the Miocene, so this is around pushing maybe 19.5 million years before the Ice Age would appear. So its fossilized remains have been owned by the National Museums of Kenya since the 1980s, but sat in its archives until a closer look revealed they held information about the previously unknown animal or mammal. Well, that's odd. I'm kind of
Happens so often.
well, I'm wondering, especially in this instance, like who discovered it, and then it was just left in. I'm guessing some museum, maybe in Nairobi, and just abandoned for what, nearly 40 years. Opening a museum drawer, we saw a row of gigantic meat eating teeth, clearly belonging to a species new to science, said Dr. Matthew Bortz, a paleontologist at Ohio University. Simbakuba kuto kafrika was not closely related to big cats or any other mammalian carnivore alive today. Instead, the animal belonged to Hyenodonta. Hyenodonts, an extreme extinct group of predatory mammals. The closest relatives today are the pangolins. So the little ant or termite eaters of different parts of Africa, Asia. Let's see. I guess let's bring up another large species of, in this case, probably an omnivore. The hyenodonts might have been as well. Daeodon. So Daeodon. Okay. This is a funny one. I haven't seen this type of a reconstruction of this omnivore. So, despite its appearance, this animal is actually a closer relative of the whales compared to different species of. Well, you could maybe say in this case like a hyena or some odd pig. Um, yeah, okay. He's very strange, and he also doesn't look very large here either. Okay, yeah, this is closer. Guessing they just killed a rhino in this case. So this animal inhabited the United States around 28 to 30 million years ago, and probably weighed in at somewhere around 15 to probably pushing over 1,500 pounds, or a little over maybe 700 kilograms, and was probably the top predator in the ecosystem that existed in.
Those are like
So
foxes.
those are likely some of the earliest species of canids, considering this is also around the time when canids would first evolve, were basically the ancestors to modern day wolves, coyotes, foxes. I don't believe true foxes have evolved at this point. But yeah, the canids probably not much more than 5 to 10 pounds, or a little over 3 kilograms running around.
Akita Bear and Kick said it's scary.
Yeah, so despite it looking very much like a well, it's also even referred to as the pig from hell, but also possibly that tends to be more of its ancestor, the Entelodon. This is a member of the Entelodontidae lineage of earlier. I'm trying to think of what specific lineage of mammals this belongs to, but yeah, this is not a pig, despite it containing very close similarities. I guess you could say you could almost compare it to a hippo somewhat, at least when looking at the skull structure, but it's definitely much more nimble than a hippo. You could not outrun this animal. I'm guessing that could be a smaller species of hyenodont that might be pursuing it, or it belongs to a different, more distantly related lineage of Oligocene epoch mammals at this point. But Entelodont would have hunted different species of rhinos. Also, at this point, they didn't have any horns, so they lacked in defense, especially in Telodont's case. Different earlier species of camels, different species of smaller horses, who else? We don't really have any proboscideans running around in North America at this point. Oh yeah. Um, I guess in this case, it seems to be just portraying him as running in the Utah Canyonlands, which is certainly possible. In fact, we've like found different types of entelodonts over in different parts of South Dakota, Wyoming. Yeah, it seems to be an older representation. They might, I mean, looking at the tooth structure, it's very possible in some instances this animal, when it wasn't hunting the different species of rhino at the time, it might have been feeding on simply different species of grasses, considering this is around the time that true grasses start evolving. And you have a wide variety of different species of animals like the entelodonts in this instance. This is a really good, this is a well preserved skull of the animal. Just as you can see, massive canines towards the front of the mouth. Like even the incisors are huge. and more herbivorous types of molars towards the back. So it might have had a somewhat sort of a bear diet to an extent. Now you can even look at like wolves of today and notice that their tooth structure, and it can differ depending on the subspecies, but it can show a very omnivorous type of indicate a very omnivorous type of a feeding behavior. So it might have been the same for Daodon as well. It likely also had a very good sense of smell. But it does share a lot of, I guess you could say, warthog-like characteristics, considering even warthogs tend to have that more side bone towards both sides of the skull. It also shares different similarities to different species of herbivorous proto-mammals from the Permian period, like relatives of moschops, and even I'd say like the Gorgonopsians to an extent. So it is interesting how you had different species of carnivores and herbivores over 256 million years ago, consisting of those side-like bony appendages, and they would continue. You could possibly even compare it to certain species of ceratopsian horned dinosaurs, considering different, but that type of a characteristic somewhat exists. But it's more of like a horn to an extent, or in many instances. But then as you head to the Oligocene and then further into the Pliocene, and you see a wide variety of different species of the pig family evolve, and like with today's warthogs, and they had that distinct look too. It's to a lesser extent, though. Okay, where were we? So, for about 45 million years after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, hyenodonts were the apex predators in Africa. So, okay, so we were over and talking about North America. Then, after millions of years of near isolation, tectonic movements of the Earth's plates connected Africa with the northern continents, allowing floral and faunal exchange between landmasses. Yeah, you had it where during the Eocene epoch, so over 38 million years ago, like a massive Tethys Sea would have virtually cuts between Europe and Africa. But I believe African animals still had the ability to migrate into Asia. However, at that point, you would have had massive species of early whale occurring in the seas at that point. And then after the sea would have receded, at least to a major extent, you would have had different species just cut through the Arabian Peninsula. Also, back when the Arabian Peninsula was much more lush, at least you would have had more of a scrubland or some type of a Middle Eastern savanna. And so animals could flourish in that area. That's also just simply would have been not just natural migration, annual migration routes, but also massive flow of animals coming from Africa into Europe and Asia. But also, what tends to be left out is animals migrating from Europe and Asia to Africa. It tends to always be like this with animals like out of Africa, sort of an instant. And in many cases, it's the opposite. So, around the time of Simbakubwa Kuto Kafrika, the relatives of cats, hyenas, and dogs began to arrive in Africa from Eurasia. As the relatives of cats and dogs were going south, the relatives of Simbakubwa Kuto Kafrika were going north. It's a fascinating time in biological history. Lineages that had never encountered each other begin to appear together in the fossil record. So Simbakubwa Kuto Kafrika is the oldest of the gigantic hyenodonts, suggesting this lineage of gigantic or giant carnivores likely originated on the African continent and moved northward to flourish for millions of years. I guess one of the theories that is correct, like when it comes to different migrations coming from different continents, especially with the proboscideans or different members of the elephant family, they did come from Africa and would flourish into pretty much the rest of the world, not including Antarctica. So you would have had like different species of obviously much later on into the end of the Pliocene epoch and to the Pleistocene or the Ice Age of different species of mammoths, mastodons, the gomphotheres that would head pretty much cover Europe, Asia, North America, and into South America. I don't know of any species, however, that would have. I mean, placentals in general, for some reason, were just rare over in Australia. Now, we do have certain much smaller species that would have finally entered the region, like different species of native rodents to Australia, but For some reason, it seems to be it. Okay, not including like the dingo. Trying to think of who else, but also just as you head back into the Ice Age or the Pliocene epochs, somewhere between 1 to or even 11,000 years ago to over 5 million years ago. It just seems to be different species marsupials that dominated different or basically most of Australia, different parts of New Zealand, and the Papua New Guinea region. So Simbakubwa kutokafrika is the oldest of the gigantic hyenodonts, suggesting this lineage of giant carnivores likely originated on the African continent and moved northward to flourish for millions of years. Okay, let's bring up another large species of mammal, a carnivore, Amphiction. So Amphiction. This guy is sort of a fluff ball, but then at the same time, he kind of isn't. So this is a species of mammalian carnivore that's in some cases can't like in you have it where it might be referred to as the bear dog, but it's quite distantly related to both. Not really being a member of the Ursidae lineage or even continuing to that or the bear family. Or even when it came to Canidae, it's its own group of amphious sonidae. Whoa. Well, that's an interesting sort of a look. I am wondering what relative this could be because at least the skull seems a bit narrow for an amphision. Um, hmm. That's interesting. I mean, maybe it might have helped it, at least with the overall fur and color accumulation, might have helped to camouflage somewhat. There we go. There's part of the skull. Yeah, this animal probably was weighing in at somewhere around 1,000. It was probably more than 1,000 pounds. It might have been pushing over 1,200 or even more. Like it could have possibly approached Kodiak brown bear size to an extent. You had it where for some reason during the Oligocene and into the early Miocene epoch. So this would have been around somewhere maybe 25 million years ago, also in North America, where a massive species of predators, I wouldn't say really as massive species of herbivores were occurring. I mean, you did have species of herbivores that were weighing well over a ton at this point. Actually, if we're talking about the Miocene or even late Oligocene, you already had some of the largest species of herbivores to exist, such as the giant Indricotheres or like animals such as Paraceratherium, which are weighing over 20 tons. But yeah, this is definitely a bone crushing species of carnivore. Yeah, it seems a bit small in this depiction, but it's actually quite large. Um, yeah, I guess that's it's a good reconstruction of it. It definitely has a very pronounced sort of a overall skull build and a very thick neck too. It is interesting. They're almost giving it like a bear sort of a um hand as well. Yeah, he looks, like he's got his eyes on some sort of a rhino. He might have also have been going after some of their earlier relatives of deer. There are also different species of calicotheres, but they tend to be known from more well-known different areas of Asia, which you would have had relatives of Amphision existing in that region during the Oligocene and even to the Miocene epoch. So, like even the Entelodonts, the Hyenodon, all of these animals likely had very good senses of smell. Question is, who possibly had the more robust or the more powerful bite force?
Look at his back foot.
Yeah, it's almost like some sort of a primate to an extent.
Yeah, and I don't see any teeth on this guy.
Yeah, it almost looks like a dog face too, literally a dog. But I would say it almost reminds me of the foot of a bear to an extent, at least when it comes to the hind foot. Now you could even say the front paws as well, considering bears do walk on their ankles when it comes to their hind feet. So he might have been a maybe a more decent runner compared to the hyenodontids. Possibly not as nimble as the entelodonts, but that is a bit of a question. But just looking at more, you could say, somewhat gracile appearance of the entelodonts, they're
This looks
probably more
like they're
built for
almost
running.
making it look like a hyena.
Yeah, something between like a hyena and just a smaller, I don't know, larger. No, I wouldn't say a larger leopard. Um, Maybe just like an elon. You know what it kind of reminds me of is a saber-toothed Macaridus to an extent, but he won't appear until the end of the Pliocene around 3 million years ago. So ultimately, hyenodonts went extinct. Global ecosystems were changing between 18 and 15 million years ago as grasslands replaced forests and new mammalian lineages diversified. That's a bit late, like by 30 million years since, I mean, not 30 million years, 15 million years in some cases.
Akita Bear and Keck said, "All this makes me think about Lion King movie."
Yeah, I guess you could say this was, well, I mean, I guess what's odd is that none of these animals are closely related to, cats, warthogs, meerkats. So yeah, despite them having very close resemblances in certain ways. But yeah, guess Pumbaa had issues, you could say, at this point. But even though it's not Pumbaa, it's literally like a walking whale to an extent. We don't know exactly what drove hyenodonts to extinction, but ecosystems were changing quickly as the global climate became drier. This is way behind. The gigantic relatives of Simba, Kubwa, Kuto, Kafrika were among the last hyenodonts on the planet. Yes, this is one of those dramatic Oligocene Miocene epoch shifts. This is a pivotal fossil demonstrating the significance of museum collections for understanding evolutionary history. No, it demonstrates the significance of constant communication so that we have access to all these different fossils. Added Professor Nancy Stevens, also from Ohio University. Simbakubwa Kuto Kafrika is a window into a bygone era. As ecosystems shifted, a key predator disappeared. I'm pretty sure he kind of relied on the grasslands to an extent, heralding Cenozoic faunal transitions that eventually led to the evolution of the modern African fauna. Most representations of different species of hyenodonts tends to view them in a more open landscape. Like, yeah, if you go for, talking about the larger species of hyenodonts, especially during the Oligocene, which first started around 34 million years ago. But if you're referring to their earlier, much smaller ancestors, where in some cases they're weighing like 8 pounds, in different parts of the world, and also like pushing 60 million years ago. But even between like I'd say 35 to 60 million years ago, they weren't very large. I mean, obviously, as you head forward in time, they would gradually become bigger. But no, and then beforehand, they were quite arboreal. So, by the Oligocene, animals like Amphitryon, the entelodonts were pretty much roaming the different types of savannas around the world. Okay. Well, I mean, this is definitely great. I guess carnivores like Arctotherium, I think the Mystitotherium hyenodont now have massive competition. I still think a really fat Arctotherium brown bear, not brown bear, short-faced bear from Pleistocene or Ice Age South America would outsize him slightly, maybe by a few hundred pounds. But on average, this animal could be the largest predator. Okay. Let's head to another part of the world. So from barharborstory.substack.com. DMR teams up with UMass, Dartmouth and UMaine to research juvenile white sharks. Okay, well, this was a massive change. He's glowing. Bug, an 8-foot female juvenile white shark, is the first tagged by DMR and UMaine. Her name is Bug. Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. The Maine Department of Marine Resources is teaming up with researchers from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and the University of Maine on two research initiatives this year to better understand juvenile white shark presence and habitat use in the Gulf of Maine. So both projects involve attaching electronic transmitters to white sharks, known as tagging, which allows researchers to track them in the Gulf of Maine. The work is conducted both from research vessels and from shore, with researchers using rod and reel to catch sharks before tagging them. DMR has been conducting boat based tagging research for different species of sharks and tunas for several years in collaboration with UMaine. Yes, I think sometimes one of the world's most favorite canned foods is also concerned about when it comes to its conservation. However, this is the first year in which a white shark has been successfully tagged by DMR's lead shark researcher Matt Davis and UMaine Associate Professor of Marine Science Walt Gullett. On Wednesday night, the team tagged an 8-foot female juvenile white shark, which was given the name Bug by Davis. The tags for this research were funded through a grant from the Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund. Since both projects began in August, 3 white sharks in total have been tagged by the researchers, including 2 by the shore based effort run by UMass biology professor Diego Bernal. We got a saber tooth on the job. So there's not a lot that I can say about these or this specific species of shark. We do have great white sharks also on the coast of Maine. A wide variety of different species of seals, like gray seals, even not Arctic seals, great gray seals. Wait, not ring seals. That's what I'm trying to say. That occur here as well. This is probably the most southern part of their range. Don't believe bearded seals don't have as southern of a range. However, there are certain islands that are almost in like the same, I believe, longitude as Maine, and occasionally they might host certain smaller populations of walrus. They're just further out into the Atlantic. The DMR began monitoring white shark activity in the Gulf of Maine in 2020, deploying acoustic telemetry receivers which detect white sharks that have been outfitted with transmitters. Currently, the DMR has more than 35 received sites deployed between Agunquit Beach and the US Canadian border. Organizations such as the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and others have been tagging white sharks for more than a decade. Wow. I actually didn't realize that. I thought there wasn't a lot going on with these specific white sharks. Both the UMass and UMaine projects will fill in data gaps on the seasonal presence, distribution, and habitat use of white sharks along Maine's coastline. I guess you forget that even further north, because it tends to be associated with different subtropical or tropical regions, that sharks will actually stay adjacent to different coastlines of like different parts of New England, like even certain areas of Alaska, different parts of like northeastern or even northwestern Asia. Like you do have, or there are sharks adjacent to like the North Sea and different parts of the British Isles over in like adjacent to the Netherlands. And obviously, as you go further north, like to Greenland, and you have the Greenland shark. But I believe you also have certain other sharks and occasionally reach the area. Let's see. While hundreds of white sharks have been tagged in New England waters, very few have been tagged in Maine waters. Is Maine part of New England? I don't think it is. Additionally, juvenile white sharks less than 9 feet in length are relatively underrepresented in the
Wait, are you talking about the
population.
states or the waters?
No, the state.
You're wondering if 2 states are connected?
No, well, I mean, Maine is just east of New Hampshire, but I thought maybe New England didn't include traditionally Maine. It was just added as its own separate state later on. Oh. Okay. Let's see. 9 feet. Okay, that's pushing around like 2.8 meters. So lately, we're starting to see more juvenile sharks in coastal Maine, which presents a unique opportunity. Maine based tagging efforts will improve our understanding of local behavioral patterns and will help us learn more about juvenile white shark movement patterns. This would benefit both marine resource management and public safety. I do wonder if the white shark, like considering its name, is a close relative of the great white shark, but it might not be. I mean, there have been certain instances where mammals that are given very similar names, or in some cases, have a bit more of like a somewhat physical similarity to each other compared to others, actually turn out to be quite distantly related. So that might be the case with the white shark. I don't think they exceed like maybe 12 feet in length or pushing like 3.7 meters. So, fishing from shore at night on southern Maine beaches, Burnell will attach transmitters on up to 30 white sharks landed on baited hooks. Wow, I didn't realize that's how they caught them.
Wait, New England is in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut.
Yeah, actually, I thought originally like, maybe part of New York was in there. I don't know when Maine was added as a territory. Because obviously they didn't become states until the founding. That's much later. Like I'm thinking of 1600s.
Oh, okay, so huh, it's interesting.
So once the shark is caught, biological data and time on the line will be recorded, followed by transmitter attachment and release. Total handling and tagging time will take 5 minutes or less. I forget how they do it with great white sharks. But this is a much smaller species. Also, I'm
I didn't know
guessing.
this. So
I don't-
New England's a region?
Yeah. Did you think it was a?
I thought it was a city.
There might be a city named that. I don't.
Well, it probably is, but I didn't know it was just a region. Huh.
Yeah, I don't remember what New York specifically was a part of. It was France. Between York Beach and Booth Bay Harbor, Davis and Golette will be tagging up to 10 juvenile white sharks from research vessels this year. Actually, I think it was the Netherlands. But yeah, wow. So several areas within the state are at least trying to capture the sharks. Wow, we've got a lot of people on this. So once caught, sharks will be brought alongside the boat, and a rope will be used to secure both the head and tail, at which point they will be outfitted with a transmitter before they are released. Public safety is a priority of both projects, which are authorized under special licenses issued by DMR. That includes stipulations to ensure the safety of beachgoers and the safety of sharks. It's funny. We're gonna stick a hook in your mouth. It's probably gonna hurt, but we're concerned about your safety. You might lose even part of your gum, maybe a few teeth, but it's okay. We are. This is for your own good. Please try not to defend yourself, or we might have to take serious precautions. Shore-based, and I'm referring to the shark. Shore-based research is restricted to nighttime when beach traffic is limited, and researchers must notify state and local officials, including Marine Patrol, when fishing. I got to be honest. Because I don't usually see something named Patrol for different species of fish. I literally thought of Paw Patrol. Okay, so both projects include, or I guess what we were just reading beforehand, Hyenodont Patrol. Both projects include restrictions on how close they can be done to public swimming areas and must be suspended if swimmers are in proximity to fishing gear. Oh yeah, I always wonder how that works. Um, Geez, how long of a line is being put out there? Mm. Well, modified chumming method using frozen menhaden chunks is allowed from the research vessels. It is not being used in the shore-based research. It is prohibited within 2 hours of sunrise, and if an incoming tide would prevent the chum slick from dispersing at a beach by sunrise, safety is paramount.
Oh, what? They don't wanna bring the sharks in to eat people?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Huh. Guessing that's like that in a lot of beaches around the world. Huh. I wonder how that first occurred. Like it was any time of day, and then I would assume though, like especially for people adjacent to certain shark heavy areas, maybe it was already known from the start. But let's say they didn't, and all of a sudden, some people were saying, "Hey, listen, we've been noticing that around like 7, 8 o'clock, we're throwing chum out and we're hearing screams, but we don't understand why. Like all of a sudden people go missing. We have come up with a theory that's due to maybe the chum bringing sharks closer in. So I think we should make it illegal to to stop people from getting eaten at that time in the morning. You're supposed to be eating cereal and not being consumed by a shark at that point, or at least having some scrambled egg breakfast sandwiches. That's not very American-like, uh, and that happened. So we're using the same species fishermen often use as bait in their inshore lobster pots. It's also important to note that our chumming method doesn't attract sharks from far away, but attracts sharks to the boat, which are already in the area. Huh. I'm wondering, I guess specifically due to the current, and depending on which way it's moving, and then it sends out the smaller scent molecules to different species of sharks or just shark individuals further out at sea. In combination, these two research initiatives will help to fill an important data gap on juvenile white sharks here in the Gulf of Maine. The more we know about these animals, the better we are able to manage this remarkable species, and the more equipped we are to support the safety and enjoyment of visitors to our coastal beaches and waters. Anything else? No, that's it. Oh, it's definitely a lot going on with these white sharks, and definitely quite a bit when it comes to making sure nobody gets consumed. Um, so that's good to see. Okay, well, I guess let's head over to another part of the world. So from Earth.com, some mist looks like something coming from a whale. A fin whale surfaces in the open ocean, sending a towering plume of spray into the air. Blue and fin whales are returning to waters where whaling wiped them out. Oh, that's good to hear. Where specifically is this occurring? The blue whales and fin whales are appearing more often in the southeastern Atlantic, offering cautious signs of recovery after decades of commercial whaling. So I'm guessing this is like adjacent to Western Sub-Saharan Africa. So like different parts of South Africa, Namibia, Angola, because that would be the southeastern Atlantic. Blue whales and fin whales are Earth's two largest whale species, yet industrial whaling removed them from many waters where they were once common. Their return has been slow and hard to measure. Well, it takes a long time for them to reproduce. And it's really hard to track marine creatures in general. Sightings and strandings from Namibia and South Africa's west coast now suggest that both species are appearing more often in the southeastern Atlantic. The rise may reflect both population growth and increased offshore observation. Between 1913 and 1978, commercial whalers killed an estimated 350,000 blue whales and 725,000 fin whales, severely reducing both species. I guess at that point they were tracking the amount that were being harvested. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Antarctic blue whales remain at about 3% of their pre-whaling population, which with estimated yearly growth of 5 to 8%. Fin whales have reached at least 30% of their pre-whaling population, with estimated annual growth of 4 to 5%. I wonder why. The blue whales, except it's Antarctic blue whale, I'm trying to think which subspecies is the largest. I wonder if it's maybe them? It's definitely, I don't think it's the dwarf blue whale, but still a 90-ton animal. And The larger blue whales are pushing over 200 tons. Fin whales, I think, can reach somewhere around maybe 60 to 80 tons. So Dr. Bridget James led the work through the Center for Statistics in Ecology, Environment, and Conservation. She is based at the University of Cape Town. Our results provide important evidence that these giants of the ocean are slowly recovering from the devastating impact of 20th century commercial whaling, which pushed them to the brink of extinction. So the team combined published reports, database entries, stranding records, and sightings made during other work from May 1964 to March 2025. Because fin whales can resemble other large species, they're very different. I mean, especially if you're comparing them to like humpbacks, blue whales, I think in some instances you could say look a bit more similar to, but they're, I'd say, a bit more. There's less width to them compared to like humpbacks. In some cases, they do not seem to be like as heavily built, though they can be. They're much longer than per se humpback whales, which I think in some cases reach somewhere around 50 feet or pushing around 15 meters. They're just not very. They only weigh maybe somewhere around 30 to 40 tons, which is still not a small whale, but they're much smaller compared to a number of species. The coast lies within the Benguela upwelling ecosystem, where cold, nutrient rich water rises toward the surface and supports abundant food. Older whaling records suggest that young whales may once have been born or raised there. Historic whaling data suggests that the southeast Atlantic may once have been an important nursery area for both blue and fin whales. But until now, we have had very little consolidated information on their more recent presence in this region. So blue whales remain scarce. The team found 12 confirmed blue whale sightings, one stranding. Huh, so he's dead. And five additional published records. Eight sightings occurred in Namibia, while four occurred off South Africa. Two calves under 33 feet or 10 meters appeared among the Namibian sightings, and a South African record included a mother and calf. Well, I guess that's not too terrible. I mean, it's just having to um, bump into these behemoths. I mean, it is interesting how sneaky they can be, and you can literally just not see them for years. It's kind of like with the different toothed whales or beaked whales that are almost impossible to come upon. These observations support the nursery idea, but the small total prevents a firm conclusion. Most blue whale sightings occurred from October through December, with other records in January, March, and April. I guess that can make sense. Yeah, depending on like what part of the year that they're actively feeding. So they're going to be obviously towards the surface in many cases. Um, Wondering about the rest. So the pattern roughly matches underwater call records linked to migration, but so few records cannot define a reliable seasonal pattern. It's a hard animal to track. Not that any are necessarily easy. Sightings remain rare, but they are becoming more frequent than in previous decades, and with sustained protection, there is reason to believe this recovery can continue. Fin whales are more common. Okay, here we go with these guys. With 76 sightings and 6 strandings. Ouch. But it's definitely more sightings in general. Groups range from 1 to 7 animals off Namibia and from 1 to 3 off South Africa. So I guess at once. Namibian sightings occurred in every month except February and June, although one stranding occurred in June. South African records appeared in March, May, and from September through December. Interesting. They definitely love hanging out off the coast of South Africa. Maybe there's better sustenance over there, especially when it comes to krill. Might be well. The weird thing is that it's a haven for orcas in the region, which would definitely like going after the calves. So that's interesting. Some fin whales fed near Luderets. I don't know where that is. While others formed mixed groups with blue and sei whales further south. Deep offshore waters may provide important habitat, but the records do not show how many individuals return or how long they stay. So recent records rise sharply. Among the confirmed sightings and strandings used to examine timing, 95% came from 2012 through 2025. Is this all just one large study? I mean, certainly possible. This pattern fits a return to former habitat, but it does not prove that recovery alone caused the rise. Dr. Simon Elwin directs sea search, research, and conservation. He was also a research associate at Stellenbosch University. As populations slowly rebuild, we would expect to see these whales begin reoccupying parts of their historical range. The increase in sightings and strandings is consistent with this gradual recovery, although increased offshore observation efforts may also contribute. Well, trying to think of what else to add here. I am shocked that they're not mentioning orcas. They're not even mentioning like maybe even great whites in the region, which can still pose a threat to the calves. But definitely orcas for sure, considering they're hunting in a pack and they actively hunt pretty much every species of whale. They're just not going after like healthy, full grown adults. So, observer effort changed greatly across years and seasons. Many recent sightings came from marine mammal observers aboard seismic vessels. I was going to say, oh, they might be going after the seal pups. And then it hit me. That's the orcas doing that. They don't usually, no, they don't really ever go after mammals in general, at least the smaller mammals. Well, if they're going after larger mammals like the orcas because they're fighting them off. So it's used sound to map rock layers beneath the sea floor during oil and gas searches. Coverage was strongest from November through April, and Namibia had no observer records for February, June, August, or September. Wow, yeah, that's a huge gap. You can have it where, I mean, Namibia and South Africa, even if you're only including Western South Africa, it's not a small area. And why I'm mentioning that is because you can have it where smaller, certain small regions of like adjacent coastline or the adjacent seas can have very different temperatures, nutrient deficits compared to other regions like just adjacent to these specific areas. So I'm guessing that it has to massively do with maybe nutrition, temperature, um, and possibly I would even think like protection from predators in certain instances. But maybe where they are off the coast of South Africa, it's not preferable for orcas. So, more vessels before reporting and more trained watchers can raise the record count even when whale numbers change little. Distant fin whales can also be confused with bride's eye or Amura's whales. So we have several different species here. Careful checks reduce this risk, but scattered observations cannot replace planned population counts. Okay, let's see. So, a little bit of propaganda towards the top. So I'm just going to skip to the next little paragraph. One blue whale stranded in Namibia likely died after a ship strike. Shipping and seismic noise can also reduce the distance over which low pitch whale calls travel. Signs of a return to the southeast Atlantic do not signal full recovery for blue and fin whales, and these populations have a long way to go to reach their historic numbers. So they point to resilience, but it should be emphasized that both species remain vulnerable to modern human pressures, and highlight that even with more than 50 years of recovery since the end of commercial whaling, I think there is still commercial whaling in different areas, but it's with other species, and that it's less of a concern when it comes to a small number being harvested. We could only compile 12 records of blue whales off our coast. Yeah, that's a small amount. There's only about 25,000 blue whale, 15 to 25,000 blue whales worldwide. It's been the same estimate for at least 10 years. So the authors call for more passive acoustic monitoring, which uses underwater microphones to detect whale calls when no observer sees the animal. They also recommended more trained observers and using whale distribution data in plans for shipping, ports, and offshore development. I think it's already occurred in different areas. Um, okay, that's it. Okay, so we're going to give everyone a minute to put anything into the comments.
Okay, Kita Bear on Kick says, "What's the bite force of the hyena?" Doesn't that depend on what hyena?
Looking at a large female spotted hyena, which can reach around 190 to 200 pounds or pushing about 90 kilograms, it can have a bite force of somewhere around 1,150 pounds per square inch. So, well, possibly even like 1,200 pounds per square inch, which doesn't sound like a massive difference, but um, that can mean the difference between being able to crunch through some part of a bone and not, which is close to basically a large Kodiak brown bear, which is also somewhere around, I believe, 1,200 pounds per square inch. So both the spotted hyena and the Kodiak brown bear will compete for the most powerful bite force, but then the polar bear can be slightly higher.
What's the lion's?
Much less. It's pushing somewhere between 800 to 900 pounds per square inch. If you look at the jaw structure, the jaw plan between a lion and a hyena, the lion, at least or this skull build in general, despite the hyena also having a larger brain, it is interesting. It's like as if like the lion's putting a little more emphasis into like especially its eye sockets, um, but more into specifically just elongated teeth, especially with its canines. Whereas hyenas don't really have major canines, and they really focus a lot of their dental plan on their inward molars. So it's also where much of the bite force is coming into hand and not really their front incisors, which is really used for just slicing off flesh, which is also what goes on with many other species of carnivores in general, is that their incisors are used for really that initial sort of slicing method, and their molars really is where most of the power is coming from. It's a much lighter force coming from the front teeth. Okay, so thanks for joining. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. We are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.